You can't have pleasure in life without skill, inspired by Alan Watts, one of my favorite philosophers. All the material possessions in life only bring very fleeting pleasure that lasts only until the hedonic adaptation kicks in. It's no good to have a sailboat if you don't know how to sail or don't have time to do it. It's no good to have the best guitar if you don't know how to play it or have time to play it. The problem in modern society is that we spend all our time chasing money and material possessions, and once we acquire them quickly, we are as empty as we are before we had acquired them. You can't have pleasure without skill. So yeah, this post got inspired by one of Alan Watts's videos, which I will link to, where he essentially talks about the fact that about all these rich millionaires who have sailboats in the port, and actually he talks about the ports that have like hundreds of sailboats and there's no one to sail them, and how essentially all these things we buy, and if there's no skill, it's very fleeting, and there's this hedonic adaptation that you need to like more and more, needs to be more and more extreme and more extreme. You need to buy more, change it more often, and in the end it doesn't give you this kind of like satisfaction, I would say is the right word. It's like you are never satisfied if your thing is pleasure. I think it's also interesting. I'm also reading a book now, A Brave New World by George Aldous Huxley, and it's also this dystopia of people where they figured that if you always get the pleasure, like if you're always satisfied with pleasure, then you never there's no emotions and you never complain, and you kind of become like this robot, like following orders and simply like just consuming and satisfying your pleasures, which is kind of scary. But I think if I would like to expand on this point, is that like how where's the practical application? So where do you spend most of your time? This is a question to ask yourself. Getting better at something, learning your skill or an art form, or buying and consuming things? When you buy a new car, the pleasure lasts very short. The difference between eating a very good meal at a great restaurant versus cooking even a mediocre meal for yourself, your loved ones, or friends. Which one brings more lasting satisfaction? And here I have a quote from Ron Davison. I love this quote. This is, you guys should definitely hear this. So, quote, "The question is whether we will structure our consciousness or if someone else will. Those who are least powerful and least rich are those whose consciousness is structured for them. Stay in tune, they are told, and they do. They rely on popular media for information and entertainment. At work, they're given defined tasks and processes. They depend on others to direct their attention. The middle class in the information economy have created some independence of thought at work and in leisure. What they think about at home is more likely to be related to their own lives, to their own family and hobbies, than what the media defines for them. What they think about work requires more problem solving and task definition than is required for those who are paid less. Their consciousness is largely directed by their own personal goals and realities. Finally, the rich and powerful are those who structure their consciousness for others. They write the software that defines the processes used to work or even though they socialize. They write the books and screenplays that hold people's attention and define conversation. Whether you are rich or poor in this information economy is at least partially determined by whether you structure consciousness for yourself or have it structured for you." Ron Davison. And it's from the article by Tyler Pearson on definition, so defining the problem. So yeah, this is super interesting. I think it's really tied to skill, basically, because we are talking about skill and pleasure. So skill is basically a technique, or in other words, discipline, which are really these are all like kind of interesting concepts, because for example, that's also something Alan Watts talks about, that discipline supposedly is another word for skill. You could think of it. It's just that we somehow relate now the word discipline for something like bad imposed, but actually every skill requires discipline, be it the discipline of practice or just discipline as in you even sometimes say, hey, this is this discipline or other discipline, because it's a sort of like there's a certain technique and form and that you have to follow. So you can't just do random things. And yeah, it feels like the trajectory is like no skill, no expression. So the first you have inspiration, and then only if you have the technique, you can express yourself. And the worst thing is not being able to express yourself. And each of us, of course, has different mediums, I would say. For me, for example, it can be like speaking right here, to recording myself. For you, it might be, I also for myself would be dancing. Or it would be I'm learning to play guitar because it feels like I love music and listening to it is one, like consuming. But if I could express sometimes what I feel through my music, that would bring some calm and satisfaction to myself. That's not possible to, away. For example, I also love cooking because I can also, yeah, sort of like express my style there and get lost. It's sort of like a meditation practice. Stop thinking and start doing. And but the truth is in each of those disciplines or skills, you need a sort like foundation to then like kind of express your authentic self. Like you can't just start off with doing whatever, because then it's just not gonna be any good. And of course you can do it for yourself, but I think the true satisfaction comes when you know the foundation, so you understand, you mastered kind of the rules, whatever the discipline is, and then you can break the rules because you understand them. I think this is interesting. It also is the case in I would say, for example, in marketing, in copywriting, or in general in writing, that you need to understand certain basic rules, like why certain things work, and some from time to time you can break them, or you can create your own, but you can't really do it unless you first kind of learn the basis. And you can talk about even like football and basketball and all that kind of stuff. The best players, you see them breaking sometimes the kind of the normal thing to do, but they only are able to do it and it makes sense and it works because they understand why they're breaking the rule. So yeah, it's interesting. So no matter the discipline in life, if you want to express yourself, it's not enough to have an idea, inspiration. You need a technique to carry out your thought in real life. And something connected that is actually that deliberate practice is the only serious way of becoming better at what you're doing. Um, so a lot of us, let's take driving. Driving is a good example. You could call it a discipline or a skill, but when you look at 99% of people, they learn, when you first study for the license, and then, maybe the first few months you kind of learn, you are more attentive and you get better. But at some point, you know, there is almost no difference at how you drive today versus 10 years ago, because you started doing it on autopilot. So instead of breaking down the big skill of driving into individual elements and figuring out, okay, how can I, maybe steer more effectively or change gears more effectively or use the pedals differently, and watch some videos, read some ideas about it, focus on it. Or really, when 99% of people drive, they listen to music, they talk on the phone, they think about their problems, their wife, their girlfriend, their work, and no one really thinks about the what they're doing when driving. They just put on autopilot. And when you put yourself on an autopilot, even though you kind of practice, so there is practice, you don't really get better. And in some cases, you might be actually practicing, you might be getting better at at the wrong thing or at the wrong technique. So that's a lot of times the case. Like, just because you practice something for 10,000 hours, is the often quoted for the mastery, well, it doesn't mean that that was actually the right thing to practice for you. So, or the technique you used, So that's interesting. Like if you eventually you might figure it out, but you also need maybe a coach, you need something. And from my experience, for example, for me, the more direct, how do you say, example is basketball, that I haven't really gotten much better for the past few years, many years actually, because I've kind of just stayed roughly the same. And the main reason I see is that like each time I play, I just kind of do the same thing I've done before. I shoot, I shoot, and I pass. And I just shoot and I think about something else. I don't really try to practice my shot, like look at how I do each individual movement. I don't really try to I don't really try to learn new things and practice and face the fact that I suck, because I just do it for fun now. And the honest truth is that when the deliberate practice kind of involves doing painful things you suck at, things you don't know, things you never tried, correcting yourself. It's different than play. So for me, it's and many times it's okay if I go to for now basketball to just chill out and have fun, relax and play, but you have to ask yourself whether this kind of something you're learning, if you really want to learn it, or are you just doing it for kind of fun, and you don't care if you're gonna really get better, because then you're either gonna do it deliberately or not. So and there's gonna be different outcomes. And something related to that I have written is that that's why I should learn to innovate rather than be creative. Yeah, that's also very interesting, because yeah, being creative, a lot of people seek how to be more creative, but I've been figuring more and more that we should aim to innovate, because innovation is kind of like creativity in practice. It's like you think about something and then you map it out and then you make it happen. Of course, it's not always that you have to make everything happen yourself, but innovation is kind of the applied creativity. And I think, of course, it's fun to like think about all the ideas, but it's also very possible that you might be, like it's never possible to tell whether the idea is good or not until you kind of test it through the real world. And I would say that's what innovation is. So, and that's connected to essentially expression. Express yourself. You test whatever the medium is. You test with reality whether the expression, how other people receive it. Do you like it? Do other people like it? What's the quality of it? When it's just in your head, it's very abstract. Another thing, it's a skill and usefulness. So I think Marcus Aurelius talks about that. No, it's actually a quote. No one objects to what is useful to him. To be of use to others is natural. Then don't object to what is useful to you, being of use. So yeah, I think that there also the other reason you could say why there's no pleasure without skill is that innately we want the biggest satisfaction we get is when we are useful to others, and we can only be useful to others when we have skills. In a way, like okay, it's a bit of generalization, but I would say like, and it doesn't have to be a hard skill. So that's connected to hard versus soft skill, and there's like this great conversation in this book, Siddhartha. Actually, I listened to the audiobook, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. So there's this conversation with Merchant, and basically Siddhartha is this kind of Brahman, or he was just kind of this monk type of, he starts off this monk and he just goes through, this book is about him going through different stages. Then he's like a lover, then he's like with a fisherman, then he's in the middle, he's like with he meets Buddha, and then he tries to be enlightened, but he doesn't really care about that. And then he moves on to like the normal, he calls them child people. So works for a merchant or with a merchant. So with like this kind of, let's say we could compare it to business world, and then at the start of the chapter, there's this conversation with merchant where the merchant is essentially like, okay, so you don't have really plenty possessions, so you've been kind of relying on other people's possessions, and the Hartler responds that, but you also rely on others people's possessions even when you are a merchant. Like everyone takes, everyone gives. And the merchant asks him, okay, so but I give, merchandise and I take money. But what do you give in exchange for the money? So do you just take the money? And Siddhartha says, well, I have three main skills. It's I can I think it's I can think, I can wait, and I can fast. And the merchant is like, okay, what is good? What are they good for me? Like, what's good fasting? And then Siddhartha explains, well, fasting is really good because other people, when they would be hungry, they would take the first opportunity in front of them, no matter what it would mean. They would take that first opportunity or whatever chance they have to make some money and eat food, even if it meant selling their soul. And he wouldn't, because he could fast and he could just, in patience, wait for something better. And so that's the kind of the reason why fasting can be useful. And yeah, they later just essentially like conclude with the fact that, yeah, the merchant attacks, so, okay, but you can also read and write. So he figures he can read and write. And I would say my takeaway is that, it's there are different kinds of skills, and the big one is also like hard versus soft skills. Like there are hard skills, like the obvious ones, like I'm good at basketball or writing, but there's also, for example, like people skills. Are you good with communication? Are you good with collaborating with people? Are you good with listening? And some other, like even more kind of crazy, like he was saying, like you can fast, or are you patient? There are sort of like skills or disciplines that you are not really born with them. They just kind of acquire them through experiences and practice. So I would say, yeah, and then there's something I wrote to that. It's not good to be. It's not good to be. I would say it's not enough to be good at something if you can't communicate it or lack people skills, and which is actually often the case, because in the end, what I said above is that you want to be useful for others. Because if you are just good at something for yourself, then, well, that's fine. But one, you're not really gonna earn any money, because that's how money works. Money is really just a form of exchange. But the truth is that you exchange value. So you do something valuable for other person, and he gives you money that kind of rewards you for the value that you provided to him. And, even if you do something like programming, usually you still have to like communicate, even if that means just getting hired or communicating like why this project is important, or presenting. So there are a lot of soft skill. And I think we live in actually, I was reading in the Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 book. He talks about the fact that we probably overvalue the difficulty engineering skills and undervalue the difficulty of sales skills, for example, because the engineering are kind of more obvious on the first hand, and the best salesmen are actually so good that you don't even know they're selling. So it's really hard to say. I also think we kind of, all this in the colleges and everywhere, we train engineers, programmers, we talk about technology. So we kind of gotten to the point that we think we can just create things, and there is no reason to like talk to other humans and sell it to them or tell them, even if it's not like sales in person. But like I was doing copywriting, so just writing and distilling down, communicating why this product, service, technology, whatever that is, it's important, is going to change your life for the better or make your problems go away. You can't. Yeah, I think a lot of us got deluded that you can just create something. Yeah, I think he says something like, "You built it, and will they come?" So there was this, I think, kind of notion that build it and they will come. But I think it's rarely the case. Even if we talk about women in our subject, it's like, yeah, you have to work on yourself to become a better person, more interesting, and have better skills with women, and be able more eloquent, mystique, whatever, like communication, humor. But if you don't go out and actually talk to them, then how would they ever know about you? Like, so that's it's just something I thought so sure. And then lastly, I think that's even that's a deeper subject. It's the specialist fallacy. I freaking love that. So that's another thing to watch out in all of this. I mean, I know this is not really connected to if you can't have pleasure without skill, but I'm trying to encompass the complexity of this subject. That well, skill, yeah, but also you can risk becoming more and more specialized in what you do. Is that, I mean, the risk of becoming more and more specialized in what we do is that we become the man with a hammer who sees nails everywhere. So that's an old story. There's an old story of that tells of three stone cutters who were asked what they were doing. The first replied, "I'm making a living." The second kept on hammering while he said, "I'm doing the best job of stone cutting in the entire country." The third one looked up with visionary gleam in his eyes and said, "I'm building a cathedral." And here's a kind of a comment from Peter Drucker, who says, "The third man is, of course, the true manager. The first man knows what he wants to get out of his work and manages to do so. He's likely to give a fair day's work for fair day's pay. But he's not a manager, and he will never be one. It is the second man who is the problem. Workmanship is essential. In fact, organization demoralizes if it does not demand of its members the highest workmanship they are capable of. But there is always a danger that the true workman, the true professional, will believe he's accomplishing something when in fact he's just polishing stones or collecting footnotes. Workmanship must be encouraged in a business enterprise, but it must always be related to the needs of the whole." So yeah, the story is there to illustrate the importance of asking why. So how does that relate to the? That's essentially what being I would say a business entrepreneur or a business or founder is. The main role is to kind of have the bigger picture and connect the dots, because often the bigger the organization, all this like kind of large enterprises, the more likely is that you're just like this tiny cog in this huge machine. And like, if you talk to your friends, like no one really understands what the hell you're doing. You might be excellent at it, but you're so specialized. I think we are the most specialized society of all time, because there's so many different jobs, and a lot of those organizations are so big. I think, well, here it could be a recommended distinction that there are some people for whom that is fine, but at the same time, you have to. I think there's this fallacy applies in so many places. It's also kind of related to the fact that we often think that when we are good at some one particular thing, like a scientist is a one good particular specialization, he thinks he can is wise above everything. It's the same with like when we ask I don't know, one of the top football players like Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, or someone else about politics. It's like, just because they're good at football doesn't mean they're good at other stuff. So yeah, there's I would say there's nothing wrong with specialization, but just be aware that the best thing you can do a lot of times is ask yourself, okay, how what I'm doing is related to the bigger picture, and then that will allow you to maybe like focus. And if you learn, it's just about how you apply it. And then the last, I think, topic there is about the excellence. So it's an interesting concept that's related to the skill acquisition, because I would say we I think Zan said that man has always searched for three things, like the perfect note and the alabaster. There was I forgot what's the third thing, but one of the thing was perfect note, and I think perfect note is kind of the encompasses the idea of excellence that we strive when you learn a skill. You have ambition. Your ambition is essentially usually, if it's quite healthy, it's excellence. It's like excelling at something. But it's I think it's very confusing thing because excellence here it really depends on what are you what's the are you looking to be excellent for yourself, or like in service of yourself, or excellent in service of others. And also I see there's distinction, like there's this distinction between ambition and curiosity. I feel like a lot of times excellence is driven by ambition, which, yeah, ambition is fine, but I would say curiosity, I'm becoming more and more convinced that we should pursue what we are curious about and explore that kind of the mystery with that framework, and in the process get better. But because ambition, and Marcus Aurelius has it that, also the quote that ambition means tying kind of your worth to others people's opinion, or like some external things you have no control over. So yeah, I would say there's this interesting distinction of like excellence, ambition, and curiosity. I don't have a final say in there. I would say I'm gonna read this quote by James A. Michener. That's the last thing. So, quote, "The master in the arts of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his information and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his own vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he's working or playing. To him, he's always doing both." So yeah, that ties more to also about the fact of like, what's the difference between work and play. So I'm gonna talk about it some other time because I will make this video way too long. But the interesting part is also, yeah, that is more ties to this, is he simply pursues his vision of excellence, whatever he does, leaving others to decide. So yeah, so like in an skill of this acquisition, there's like some vision of excellence, which when you just have pleasure, when you go for pleasure, there is no vision of excellence. So in a healthy, you have some vision when you usually start a skill, you have some vision. Okay, I want to be that good, or I want to do that, or I want to be able to do that, or and yeah, that's just another perspective. And last kind of concluding things is that there is a carton, I would not say counter argument, but sort of like related subject that I'm going to talk about in a different video, which is that skill is nothing without virtue. So I don't want to overpraise the skill, because skill is still one step above the importance of virtue. And I think ethics, morality, and virtue are a subject that's been kind of forgotten in this world, and there are people like Jordan Peterson that are bringing it back. But or Nassim Nicholas Taleb also talks a lot about virtue signaling and the skin in the game, and that, yeah, skill is one thing, but being useful is good, but being a good person is the foremost important. So yeah, to close things off, too many times in Western society we get caught up in a loop of doing work we don't really enjoy and doesn't move us forward, and compensating for that by throwing our money at consuming things or buying material possessions, which can never fill the void that's present in our hearts and minds. So yeah, I was Conrad, yerba mate addict. The topic was, you can't have pleasure without skill. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like what you see and you want to support this show, then make sure to subscribe and you will get notified about upcoming videos. Also, if you're interested to learn more about the quest for questions, or want to work with me on marketing strategy or your personal brand, then head over to conradyerba.com. And also there you will find that you can download my
a book on email marketing and B2B marketing strategy called The Art of War on the Inbox. And in the meantime, let yerba be with you.